Hello and welcome to Angel's Costumes Behind the Seams. I'm Jeremy Angel,
I'm Richard Green.
and you will notice we're missing one voice. Jonathan has abandoned us for a week to go rest and have a nice holiday. Not that we're jealous at all.
No.
So you are stuck with just Richard and me this week, I'm afraid.
Just the two of us. He's got his knotted hanky on his head somewhere and he's paddling down on the south coast.
Exactly. Now you can all decide what colour his knotted hanky is, so that's fine. The interview we're presenting today is my chat with Ian Fulcher. Ian is a costume designer who's been working in the industry for over 20 years now. He didn't study costume at university. He actually studied fashion design, marketing and manufacturing at Huddersfield, which he graduated from. He then worked for us for 3 years. He went on to become supervisor, assistant designer, and then a designer in his own right. He's worked in TV, film, computer games, commercials, and it was a lovely chat, and we go into detail about his history, his thought process, how he approaches everything. And he's a designer I enjoy working with. He is extremely easy to work with for other people because he's a big supporter of teams and people working together and coming together. So I hope you all enjoy this interview.
Yeah, and he's fundamentally a really, really nice guy.
Yes, exactly, which helps. Which definitely
Which
helps.
always helps.
Which always helps. I'd like to point out that throughout the interview, we keep referring to a production called Boys. It has since been changed, and now official title of the production is It's a Sin. So whenever we say Boys throughout this interview, it will be the new production that's coming out very shortly called It's a Sin. So we hope you've been enjoying these conversations. We've been enjoying your feedback. If you have any questions for us, please email us at podcast@angels.co.uk. You can visit our website, which is www.angelsbehindtheseams.com, or you can find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are /Costume Podcast. And here is my chat with Ian Fulcher. Today I'm going to be talking to Ian Fulcher. Ian is a costume designer who I've been working with for several years. He's no stranger to Angels. He worked for us for a little bit of time as well. He has worked on a plethora of different TV shows and films, including Humans, Marvelous, soon to come out Boys. Ian, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, how you doing? You all right?
I'm okay. I'm worse off than you. You're in Italy, so you'll be able to enjoy yourself. Where I'm stuck in London, so I'm not jealous at all.
Don't be jealous. I'm just looking at the Alps in front of me. Don't be jealous.
I'm going to change all the questions now, make it much harder for you. Ian, the point of these interviews is we're trying to give people a far better understanding of costume and where it sits in the industry and how it works. We feel it's sometimes the poor relation when it comes to certain departments. It's also not understood how many people work in the department or how the department works. And we're just trying to give people an idea of how it works and how people who have got to different levels in the industry, within the costume industry, have got there. So with that in mind, I'd love to start with a really nice, easy question for you, which is, how did you get here? Where did costume start for Ian Fulcher?
Where did it start? Oh God! I suppose. Well, I actually started. I never studied costume. I studied fashion design and marketing and manufacture. God, when did I graduate? 98, I think.
Okay.
And then from there, I went on, and actually after that, I set up a little fashion. I was going to say a fashion house, but you can't call it a fashion house. It sounds far too grand, isn't it? It was literally designing clothes and selling on a market in Birmingham. But I set it up with a friend from uni. It's called Graham and Lucy. That was our name.
Really?
It was my middle name and her middle name.
Oh, fine. Okay. The most random name for a thing.
I know, it's kind of, I don't know, maybe because we were post-uni and at university I was always called Graham for some reason. All our gang called each other by our middle names. Anyway, and then from there, I actually really wanted to move to London, and I remember seeing an advertisement in the Stage magazine. Does that still exist?
The Stage, yes. The Stage does still exist today. Yes.
Okay. And then I saw an advertisement for production at Angels, and to be honest, I didn't really know anything about costume or production, or I'm going to say I didn't really know who Angels were at the time.
No, which is something which has come up, which we found really interesting, which is people just don't. Why would you know about angels? So
Yeah.
it's always really interesting to hear about people's introduction to it.
Yeah, and I can't. And so I applied for the job and didn't get an interview. And I'm not surprised. I mean, why? And then I had a phone call. I think it might have been Richard, because Richard Davis, who used to be head of menswear at the time, men's period costume, and he pulled my CV out and said, "Listen, we've got some vacancies going in the costume department. We're doing an open day. I'd love you to come down." So obviously I was like, "Oh yeah, God, obviously, of course." And then so I came down to the open day, but after going around, because at the time this was in Camden.
Yeah, I was about to say.
And we had a tour around the building, and Carol Race,
Yes,
used to be head of women's costume, period costume.
Yeah.
And I just, went round and I said, actually, I'd like to join the women's costume department. And obviously, thank you, Richard, but this is, I'd like to go this direction. And I was interviewed and then obviously got the job. And that was back in 2000, I think. 2000.
And who were you? Yeah, and who was with you then? Because in the men's department around about that time was, I think, Nat and Bart and Matt, maybe.
Yeah, so Nat and Matt were contemporary with Sarah Prince, and then in men's there was Charlotte Sadler, and I can't think of all the rest of them.
Vanessa would have been there.
No, Vanessa was in women's.
Okay.
And Holly Wallerton. I started with Holly as well. Holly and I are good friends.
It's an amazing bunch when you look at it, the people that you actually started with or are working with, because if you look at where you all are now, it's actually quite incredible that you were all training up at the same time, and you're all designers in your own right now as well.
Yeah, I think it's exciting, and I mean, I don't know, has it happened since? Has it happened before? I mean, I don't know.
I can happily turn around and say I'm not old enough to know if it happened before, but there are two other hosts of this podcast that I can speak to in the preamble or in the conclusion to find out.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't know if it's been as I said, in the top of my head, I can't think of it being as such a sort of core group suddenly all becoming designers. I mean, I could be very, very wrong there, but as a team all coming together and starting and training up together, I'm not sure there has been that have gone on to designing. I don't know about for the supervising and standby and that side, because you've got the Mike Hodge, Maria Smith, Mark Lord, and all of those who, Mark maybe you should remove from that because Mark does design from time to time, but that are designers. So it might be you might be a part of a very special class.
And I think it's actually interesting how the different routes, I'm kind of thinking Matt, Nat, Bart, Holly and I, off the top of my head, the different routes I think we've gone as well to get to all the positions we're at. Not one of us, I feel, has gone the same route. It's
interesting you say that, because it's the same for everyone, how they all got into costume, because again, everyone's got different routes how they got to Angels or how they started figured out to do costume at university. So when you started, so you wanted to work in the ladies department. How did that then begin? What was your training? How long were you here training to be a costumier?
So I was there for just shy of 3 years, and we used to have weekly lessons with Carol. And actually, I always think one of the main, because I've always had an absolute obsession with history and costume and architecture, paintings, blah 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 blah. And so I've always been aware of costume. It's always been focused on the female side of costume and clothing. I mean, when I was at uni doing fashion, it was female design, and when we set up our little label, it was female clothing. So it's always been primarily that side. But I think one of the main things I remember learning from the lessons we'd had at Angels were all the underpinnings and the structure to create the outer layers, to create the silhouette, which before you kind of, you thought you knew, but you don't. Well, I didn't. So I'd say that's one of my I'd say that'd be for me one of the main memories and what I've learned the most, I think, from all the lessons we used to have with Carol. And also just, I think, maybe the use of colour as well. Because also you'll learn, when you're at Angels and you're doing costume, you don't really know, you're just putting not just putting, you are putting clothes together. That sounds terrible. Not just, what I mean is you don't know about the filming side. You don't know about the colors that work on camera, the textures, and all that. So you're learning about, as I said, the periodically correct clothing, how to put clothing together, how to do fittings, how to put clothing on a living person, and how to create something, and also working alongside designers when you're there, who have each and every one has their own vision and their own eye. So as a costumier, you had to be very good at just listening and achieving what the designer wanted, and each individual designer had their own opinion. So you had to be very diplomatic. Well, I don't know. I hope I was. I don't know if I was.
You learn how to deal with people, and and it does make sense. It's a nice way of actually putting it. You're putting clothing together, but the vision and everything's coming. The vision's coming from the designer on with the production, so you're fulfilling what they need to do rather than what you'd like to do. But it's what you'd like to do, but towards their vision, if that makes sense.
And the thing is, it's all very well when you're working with the designer, but also the designer's designing a piece, but they're actually being not there. They've had discussions previously before coming into you of, with the directors and the actors and the concepts and the production line, everything, so they've got their vision they're working to, and sometimes they have to mold what they also want to do, and that has to change as well. So it all has to be adaptable. So you can be working on one look and suddenly it just changes 2 weeks later when you were there because the color palette suddenly changed, or I don't know. Do you know what I mean? So again, it's about being adaptable and just working together as a team. Actually, that's one of my main things about everything. It's teamwork. It's funny, actually. I never thought that. Just thinking, I've never really thought how much it's teamwork then at Angels as well. I'm just saying it now.
Well, it's an interesting point, because it's always what Daniel keeps saying about the thing is he's always trying to make sure that the team of the costumiers is works well together, and it's very important to me. You could have the best costumiers in the world, but they don't work well as a team, and they can't slot in easily doing other people's jobs as well. It just doesn't work for him, and that's one of the things he's been very, very big on trying to set up, is the decent team that everyone gets on and works well together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I always, whenever I come in, I always work with Emma, right? Just because I just get on so well with her, and I know I can swear at her and she can swear at me, and I won't take offense and she won't take offense, and I know, and she knows what I like and blah blah blah, and I know that so that works. And I must admit, a couple of times when she hasn't been available, when she's on pregnancy leave, and I miss not working with her. So.
It's always nice to hear that people feel so highly about the costumiers that they want to work with them, but know they can work with other people. But you completely understand when people have a preference to working with them. It's the same with Verity Hawks. Verity likes working with Rashpal. It's not that she doesn't dislike any of the other ones. It's just they get on. Rashpal understands Verity understands Rashpal, and that's what it works. And the same for you and Emma, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. But then that also goes on to working with your team. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same point of view. It's always, you have that. Well, you're building up a working relationship, and it's just important because it makes actually the job so stressful. You want to make it, where you can, less stressful. So you do.
What happened? So you did your 3 years, and then at what point at the 3 years did you sit there and go, actually, I need to spread my wings. I want to do X, or what was the point within the during those first 3 years that you went, I need to go, because what was the jump?
So I was working with a designer called Ralph Wheelerholes on a film he was doing called Piccadilly Gym, and I mean, God, that's bonkers design. It was so much fun, and I don't know why I suddenly decided. I thought I think the right time's right, so it's the right time to leave. I remember handing my notes in, and Ralph kind of was like, "Oh no, can you please stay and finish off working here and finish off the film working here?" And I just didn't. I think I wanted to go at that point, and when I decided I want to do something, I do it. I kind of quite strong-minded like that, and so Ralph actually checked with Tim to see. I think it was okay for me to come in and work with him as a freelancer, and then and Tim said, that's fine, and then I was allowed to come in. I think I left on a Friday, and then I was very, very fortunate to come back on the Monday working with Ralph on his film. I was more of a daily at the time, just coming in, pulling, but yeah, I mean, it's amazing that Ralph allowed that. Amazing that Tim allowed that. To be honest, I know I was very lucky.
It's interesting that you sit there, because it's one of the few examples I think I've heard that someone actually asked. Because normally what happens is someone hands the notice in, the last day they finish, they go, and then they're back in on the Monday on another production. You're like, you could have told them that I'm going to work with X or I'm going to work with this. But you're always going to be found out, because the chances are, if you've got hired as an ex-member of Angel staff, they're going to probably send you back into Angels, because that is an advantage.
I could absolutely. I remember, it was completely fine. It was a bit weird. It was really weird, obviously, coming in and just coming. It was 3 days later, whatever. Yeah, it was weird, but it was exciting. I was really excited, and then I left. Oh, obviously the film finished, and then I was a freelancer. I mean, God, I just think I had my mother constantly on the phone going, you okay? You okay? Is everything okay? It's like, yes, Mum, it's fine. Stop stressing. Obviously, I think she still does. Anyway, from there, I think there was some other designers that I sent my CVs out, and there were some other possibilities came up, but then Ralph got another job, and it was a one-off BBC drama called Whose Baby? That was it. It's called Whose Baby, and he actually asked me to supervise on it. Which, bearing in mind, I'd never really been on a film set properly, and then which I did. I mean, looking back, gosh, he took a gamble, and he was incredibly supportive. I remember, very supportive, and I just really picked it up. And I would the standby and did we have a trainee at the time? Yeah, we had a trainee, and the thing, I don't know, God knows what the standby and trainee must have thought, but I was very honest. I'm not going to lie. There's nothing to lie about.
No.
And so and then from there, I then worked with Ralph for about 5 years, supervising, was like his supervisor, assistant designer, and then had lots of fun projects, and then maybe worked with maybe one or two other designers, actually two other designers. And then after about 5 years of working, I just thought, right, enough's enough. I don't want to supervisor assist anymore. So I just stopped. And so I want to design. And I literally just, I think I'm fairly stubborn. So I was like, that's it. And then I probably had about 2 years of not struggling, but having a lot of time off and stressing and having the odd commercial and building it up. I think my first jobs were designing government commercials.
Really?
Yeah, for some of the, what they called, COI or something. So so I designed all the government commercials. And then from there, started getting a few more commercials, and then just meeting producers and line producers. From there, just getting on with people. You know what? It's all about people skills, this job. I think it's about chatting and just getting on with people, because I always think you can be incredibly creative, but if you have no people skills, give up. God, that sounds negative. Sorry. That's terrible.
No, it's true though, because look, from looking at it from one point of view, if you're going to, you need to be able to communicate to people anyway to get them to understand what you're doing. So if you can't talk to other people, number one, you're not going to be able to do your job anyway as a designer, because how are you going to get your message across to anyone in your team? But on top of that, it is about communication, and it is about how the networking, because you're going to be spending 12, 15, 20 weeks with these group of people. So if you're someone they don't want to talk to, they're not going to hire you.
I'm not saying I'm the most jolly person, for God's sake, but but then from there it was just about getting on with people. I remember my first film, it was, oh God, I think I've erased the memory of it, but I remember I was paid £250 a week, and I had a budget of probably £1,000, £2,000. It was a very stressful job, and because it was my first sort of film and first big job, which I thought at the time.
Which was it?
God, what was it called? It was called, I think it's called The Facility. It was incredibly stressful. And then the next job, I was asked to do the next film, and it was £500 a week. And that was a really nice job, because everyone was nice. The director was nice. It was all doable. It was a really good team, and everyone was just friendly. And actually thinking about it, maybe there were other people on my first film, people that made it more stressful than it should have been, you know. So then the second film, you know, it's probably £500 a week, and it was fun, you know. We had a laugh, and it was just brilliant. You felt you were doing something fun, and then from that, I got on really well with the producer, and then he was friends with the director, and then I was asked to design his film, and it had like Timothy Spall and Imogen Poots and Craig Roberts and who else was in it? And that was like £1,000 a week. But I did it just because of the cast, and again, the director was so lovely. And I sound like I'm talking about money, but I think I'm saying it more that actually I just did it because I wanted that. I had to build up my CV, had to build up the opportunities, and sometimes it's not about money. And I think a lot of people just think it's all about money, 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 and it's not. You know, it's about loving a project and where it can take you in the next step. Definitely, I'd think about that.
It's something definitely I agree with, because it's not all about the money. It's also about your well-being. It's about the health, the work-life balance as well. And you don't. And yes, okay, money is important, but at times also you've got to be working on this thing. We've all done jobs we've hated, and it's you don't want that. I desperately remember doing one job where I couldn't get on with the second or the third at all, and I was a runner, and it was like, you know what, put me on the bell, I'll stay on the studio on the bell, I'll read my book, I'll do whatever you want, but you know what, this is 10 weeks, this is a paycheck. I hated that job. But and it then tells me, okay, this is what I'm looking out for, and you want to work in a happy place. So no, I completely
absolutely.
And I think, you might think it sounds all about the money, but it's not. You're just making the point of, it was a great job. It wasn't well paid, but it was a good job. It was experience, and it was the contacts you got to make as well. So it was all worth it.
And I think that's the right actually. It's the contacts, and it's just building. It's just building something up, and then it is. But that's why you should think. You should always. I always try to aim that my next job should be a bit, not a bit better, but a bit bigger if it's possible. You know, just another step up. And you know, just it's only tiny little baby steps or whatever. If you go in a little step to the side, I think it's a gradual progression. I think actually it's probably. I think so many people now just they expect to be right at the top, and it's like, actually, come on, hang on, it's not going to happen.
You've got to put your time in, and it's also you've got no idea what the big thing's going to be. I could be very wrong on this, but when you started work on Humans, for example, you possibly didn't know Humans would be the success it was that first season that came out, and people loved it. At the time, it was this not low budget, but it was a Channel 4 TV series, and then suddenly it became what it came very, very quickly for that first season, and it continued going for a few more seasons. But at the time, it might have been seen as a small job for you, but you did it for whatever reasons, and it was a big thing which allowed you to get the next one and the next one, because there is, I don't know the point I'm even trying to make there, but it's a case of you've got it's not about, as I said, it's about the better. You took a job for whatever reasons, and if that job becomes a success, you're never guaranteed for it to be a success, but if it was, then great, but you took it for the reasons you did, and it got the benefit you needed.
Absolutely. You never know. I mean, God, I mean, how can you know?
No, I could have sworn Mrs. Henderson Presents would have been a sensational film. It had everything I thought people would love, and it was a success. It wasn't a huge success, but when you're in it, you think it will be. So that for me, that always showed me it's like it was enjoyable.
Always think when you're having a lovely time, you're really enjoying it, you always think, oh God, you're having too much of a nice time. This is going to be a disaster when it comes out. Because you always think, it's always like negative thinking. Was that just me? I don't know.
So with just talking with this, what are the notable differences you've seen between working now as a designer to working when you started, or just in general when you started as a designer to what it's like now?
The thing is, it's very different, I think, because you're dealing, say, the first job I ever designed, it was just massively low budget. I mean, I think it was a budget of $500,000 or something. It's so low budget. So I think the difference, and then the difference with something you're doing now is, you know, if you're doing a drama series, it's £8 million per episode. I think Giri Haji was. Not my budget, I mean the overall production budget. My God, that'd be amazing if it was. It's two very different things. So do you know what I mean? So I don't. And also you've got, you know, when you're doing bigger projects, you have bigger teams. I remember the first job I designed on the first film, I had one assistant who actually wasn't paid, I don't think. Well, she paid £50 a week, can't remember. And so it's a bit like, I don't know, so it's very different now because then you have a team of however many working and la 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 la. So I I mean, maybe it'd be a question of if I was designing, say, I don't know, say Giri Haji now, and I was designing the same kind of project 15 years ago, I think I'd be able to compare, but I don't think I can really, to be honest.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. And then, is there a project that you've enjoyed the most? Which one have you enjoyed designing the most? Is it going to be Japan, or was it going to be?
Well, I think the thing is, I think every job is so different because you can enjoy the design and the design process, but it's about working on the project as well. So, and you can actually get different things from each project. I mean, I loved, say, my last job, Boys, which was the Russell T Davies script, and it was all set in the 80s, and it was a 5-parter, and well, it is, and it was, I mean, my team were amazing and we had so much fun, but it was so stressful, like, because literally we're filming the entire decade of the 80s it was in 5 eps, but in one shoot day, you would have the 5 different scripts. So you'd have all the time, all those different dates in the 80s in one shoot day. So encapsulating all the background, the principles, and then literally every scene would probably be an establisher because we're traveling through this decade. So it was just, my feet never touched the floor. I mean, I think the team would just constantly run ragged, but we just had so much fun. But then like Giri Haji was just amazing because, again, I mean, it was 10 months, was it 11 months? I can't remember. And we were filming in Japan, living in Tokyo for 3 months. I mean, God, you can't complain with that. And it was amazing. But again, being out in Tokyo, it's very stressful, and because it's a completely different, not work ethic, different work. How they film a production is very different to how you film in the UK. And so all of us as a team had to completely change the way we worked. But but I still loved it all. I mean, I remember the last day being really quite emotional because myself and actually all the team, the actors, the director, producer, production department, production design, and makeup, everyone got on so well. So I love that job because of that. So so I think every job, it brings something different. So, I mean, obviously there's been a couple I've hated, but I'm not going to name what they are. But
I know for a fact that you really did enjoy Haji. Am I pronouncing it correct? Giri Haji, for the simple reason I remember seeing you the week before you went out and about 2 weeks after you came back, and you were so excited to be going out and spending the time in Japan, and you were so miserable about being back afterwards. That one, I distinctly remember that one. So
that sounded about right. I mean, it was. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm not going to. It really was. And also the cast was so nice. Everyone was just so lovely to work with, and it was just. And I really love working with Julian, the director, who had worked with on Marvelous, and just because he's so collaborative, and he really respects your opinion, and I really respect his opinion. So if I didn't agree, I'd argue my point, and he'd listen, and then he'd either, take it on board, or he'd just say, "No, Ian, I want to do it my way," and vice versa. And so I find that really respectful. And so it brings out the best in me, and actually then my team, and then everyone, it just, because you're all on the same page. I think it's so important.
And it's also, we're talking about Julian Ferranio.
Yeah.
Look, just from the one I know quite well, which was Marvelous, which I just thought was a lovely British TV film. It was a really sweet story, and it was really well told, and I enjoyed it. But it must be lovely to work with him because you're talking to someone who works in quite a lot of TV, big TV as well. So that must have been great fun to.
Yeah, and I think because his history and the work he's done and his amazing work he's done, you just automatically respect. Well, I personally just automatically respect him because of it. Because he's got a good eye, and I think that's what's so important.
Yeah, he's got the CV to back it up, but it's not just the CV, because he is, as you're saying, when you meet him, you could tell clearly and enjoyed it yourself as well. So
absolutely. Oh God, yeah.
You mentioned before about the team and everything like that. How important is your relationship with your supervisor and, let's say, and the rest of your team as well on a production?
Oh God, really important. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do a job without having a team around me. And I think they're there to support you. They're there to listen to you. But you work together actually, because I'd like to think I support them. And I know in the past they've supported me through. But they're there. I think that's when you build up a working relationship, you also build up a friendship with. Well, I have with them, and I'd like to think I have. I'm sure if I listen to this, I hope they're not rolling their eyes. My God. But yeah, no, I think really important. But also all the team, from the standbys, assistants to trainee to just the dailies. I mean, it's about everyone just being on board together, and everyone putting in the same amount of effort and working together. And I always like to be there first thing and just putting the hours in.
I know from working on Boys with you guys just how much work Laura did, and how much maybe the right phrase, how much license you gave Laura to sort of make certain decisions because you trusted what the decisions were going to be.
Absolutely. But I think that's why it's so important, because Laura's assistant designer on that. It was so important. It's because I worked with her on Giri Haji, where she was my supervisor, and from that I just trusted her eye, because she knew what I would like. And so it's an implicit trust in someone, which I have in her. And so I know I could just say, we need this, all this, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. Yeah. And she'd go, how often find it? And it all, obviously there's always something I'm going to be like, yeah, I'm not sure about that. But, that's not me being difficult. It's just because, sometimes you just like, you're shifting what you're thinking. But I think it's so important to have that trust in somebody for them to enjoy the job as well. Because when they're enjoying it, and when because for a while there's going to be stressful times, but you've got to get through that stress. And I think having that respect within your team, because I always love working with my trainees as well. My trainees are my favourites, just because they're I love that's why I think it's quite interesting when they have the passion. I get excited by that, and I've been incredibly lucky having some amazing trainees. But actually, no, I'm lucky, and standbys. I think I've just been quite lucky.
Just touching on that, how does it work picking the team? Obviously, you. I'm assuming you normally choose your assistant designer and also supervisor. When it goes further down than that, do you get involved, or you trust those two to make the decision?
I'd say I probably do get involved, because even though I'm saying, I probably am quite controlling. just to be honest. But at the same time, say on Boys, the crew were Manchester based, and so I only knew Laura, who came up with me, and we got an apartment together. And then, but the rest of the team I hadn't worked with before. But Laura really recommended Sam, the supervisor, and then Laura recommended some of the standbys, and because she'd worked with them, I think, or she knew them, and then Sam recommended the trainee and everybody else. And because I trusted Laura's judgment in people, because she knew who I'd like, it just, one thing led to another. And we were just, all the cogs came together to have this great team, which I know I'm very lucky with.
I know from working on Boys, your team, it was a hard job for you guys, and it was obvious it was a hard job, but you all enjoyed it, because even though it was up against the wall with certain things and certain, I'm not going to say too much because I don't know.
It's not out yet. We better be careful.
Be very careful with that. But the different periods that you would jump in between at different times, and the schedule that you guys had wasn't the most easy thing for you guys. But I'll always remember the nurses. It was just the case of how many different nurses we had to figure out from the different. And just with remembering the conversations about, well, it's 1981 here, or it's 1985 here, and your natural reaction is that's a normal nurse's uniform. But to get back the research that you and Lauren have done and go, no, it's got to be like this, or this color and this style, and it's like, I don't know if people properly understand how much
they do. I mean, I'll never forget Laura. Literally, I think we had so many meetings on the crowd truck about it, and literally, I think the stress levels, it was just insane, and then it's got to a point. It's like, God's sake, this has just got to stop. This is just becoming ridiculous. Come on. And but because we've just both cared, and because you care about something, you
Yeah.
you go the extra mile. And I think,
Mm.
and again, actually thinking about that with the team and why I've been so lucky with my teams, because they care. So, and, and I'm going back to these nurses. Oh my God, it's because we care. God, I hope we've done it right. I hope somebody's not going to write in going, well, that collar stud was not worn in 1984. It was worn in 1990. I don't know. Please don't.
No, don't. Yeah. Please don't.
Leave me alone.
I think the costumiers have the same flashbacks as you might have about the nurses as well. The amount of ones we went through.
But then you get to that point where you're like, we're doing drama. We're not doing a reconstruction. It's about an artistic license. But then for me, it's about you've got to know that that's right for you to know how you can shift it.
Well, that's a beautiful lead into one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which was what relevance for you does historical accuracy have in storytelling, in the costume for you?
I remember years ago watching a film. I'm not going to name the film, and I remember because I'm so obsessed with my history and particular points in English and Russian history, and watching a film set in 1600s. And I remember, I don't know, I think I was early 20s, watching it and coming out being so angry because some of the characters were wearing, she was wearing a medieval wimple and she was wearing some 17th century blah, 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 I don't know, whatever. And I was just kind of really being really high on my horse about it. And then, and I think now designing and knowing about creative license and knowing that actually it's not necessarily, you can do a job and suddenly the director will like, I don't want anyone to have hats in this. You're like, oh God, this is like, I don't know, what period. Okay, well, and you can argue your point, but there's only so much you can argue when it's just black no. So the thing, with design, that's, I think that there's layers behind the scenes that you don't necessarily know about as a viewer. Am I not answering your question? Am I really? I've gone to
No. Yes, you are. I mean, because what you've actually said is before you can, your historical accuracy is important, but before you can actually play around with historical accuracy, you've got to know your history before you mess around with it. But on the same token, it is a recreation. It is drama. It's not a factual, accurate piece, and therefore you can take some artistic license with it. But what you're saying is you take artistic license once you understand what it should be before you do that, rather than going, I'm going to put sparkly silver shoes in a Victorian thing. It's like, well, no, that's way too far if it's not got anything. But
I mean, you can be very stylish. If you want to, you can have this. I mean, God, that'd be amazing. Imagine doing that. It'd be so funny. Yeah, I really think they're worn by Queen Victoria. Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
Well, she wore sparky shoes. What you want about?
Hey, it was on TV. I watched it on the program the other week. It's true.
Oh my God, I'm gonna buy that.
That generally is one of the things I always find interesting when it comes to how people watch TV, and especially period pieces, which, if you think about it, in maybe 20 or 30 years, there is going to be a generation of people who are going to take The Crown as accurate and as law and not realize how many liberties have been taken by the designers or the stories for whatever reason. And that's always a really interesting thing, which I think that's where this historical accuracy, not issue, but conversation, I think has a very prevalent place, which is how real people take the content they're watching on TV and film.
But I think it also makes it more, I think it's more visually, is it more visually interesting? No, I don't think it's more visually interesting. I think it's, I don't know, I think when you're creating something and when it's on the screen, I think it's, I don't know, I think if you're putting a twist on it, I just think it adds a bit more of a layer.
I had it with the Robin Hood film that came out recently, a while ago with Taron Egerton. And what happened was when the trailer came out for it, everyone was sitting there sort of criticizing, there's machine stitched this, or there's modern twist with that. And actually, what I found hysterical with it was it's a fictitious character, number one. So the story itself isn't true anyway. And number two, that's the direction the director wanted to go to, and had that conversation clearly with you, because it was a Julian Day production, clearly wanted a certain look. There's no way someone is going to let something that looks modern appear in a period piece unless there's a reason or it's wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
but it got people talking, and that's the other thing of, okay, fine, they didn't like it, but there was a lot of people for the week that trailer dropped talking about Robin Hood, because of the factual inaccuracies, but they weren't talking about the factual inaccuracies. They were talking about Robin Hood. So,
but then it's sort of a fine line, isn't it? Because then I can't remember, there was a TV show recently, and I remember seeing it was some medieval film, medieval drama, and there was a centre-back zip on a medieval dress. There just was, and I do remember thinking, "Come on, that's just shocking." And I think there's a fine line, you know.
yes.
But then that's just more the manufacturing, and it's actually, I don't know, that to me is just shoddy. I don't know, obviously not naming anything, but I think that's where knowing your period and knowing how something should be constructed, but then knowing how you can twist it. You know, I'm not saying I'm the oracle, but I don't put a centre-back zip in something.
I bring it up for the simple reason it's a conversation that is going on, and it is happening, and it's something I find very interesting because everyone has different takes on it and views on it. So it's, we're not saying the oracle, but that's the Ian Fulcher.
I'm the oracle.
The other question I'd love to ask about relationships and everything. How important is the working relationship with the costume suppliers, the costume houses, and everything like that?
Oh, I think it's really important. And I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier about teamwork, and it's about building trust. And again, I think it's about having trust in. I always think if you're sad, I don't know, there's something's come up, you're in a really sticky situation or something, I don't know, you're kind of really stressed and it's happened very last minute. Having that trust and that foundation of trust with me, you can, I know I can rely on you. Does that make sense?
No.
And I think that's really important. I mean, you know, there's some costume houses I don't have. I mean, I know I have the best working relationship with you guys.
You have to say that today.
No, but just honestly, I was actually just thinking of the others, and I know I do. I mean, just because I maybe that goes from having worked for you back in the 2000s or whatever it was. So I don't know, but I feel like, you know, building up this working relationship for the last, oh my God, that'd be 20 years. Oh my God, that's insane. So yeah, so that to me, it's about trust and about, which is important. Very important.
I will be wrapping this up, but there is actually a question I did want to ask, picking up on what you said right at the beginning, which is you mentioned about you wanted to work in the women's department. Do you have a preference designing for men or for women, or do you not mind?
I don't actually mind. You know, I don't.
It was only because you made that comment I suddenly thought, I wonder if you.
I think that'd be more rooted. When I did my fashion course, it was all women's wear, and I only ever designed women's wear. And then, you know, doing my little label or whatever, it was women. So I think it was a natural progression. But no, I definitely know. I'm definitely happy either. I think.
No, it's just that some people aren't. Some people say no. Some people say they do have a preference. As I said to you off air, someone actually categorically just said no and next question. So
it's funny because I think with menswear, because something can be a suit, it's so simple. Well, you think it's so simple, but it just really isn't. Say on Giri Haji, you've got the lead actor who's, you know, I think he had 3 suits that were so similar, but his fitting, we ended up going up a couple of sizes to then take it all in, to give it a really slightly non-identifiable date in its suit, in its fits and cuts, so it wasn't too contemporary, it wasn't too dated. But to get to this level of his finished design for his suiting, you know, God, it took how many fittings? But you'd never think that. And so having menswear, you think, is it simpler? Is it easier? God, it just isn't. Because sometimes I think the simplest thing's the hardest thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you take one of the most simplest costumes ever, which would be Marlon Brando from Streetcar Named Desire, but a simple costume had a massive impact on a lot of people, and yeah, it's something that stands out in a lot of memory. But but it was still just a t-shirt and trousers.
Yeah, but it's the cut and it's the way it's rolled and it's the
exactly.
It's everything, which is, and that's why I'm so obsessed with details, actually, because of things like that. Wow.
And my final question for you is, what single piece of advice would you give to someone who wants to become a costume designer, or if you think, oh, I don't know about that one, or who wants to work in costume?
I would, you know what? I'd say listen, just listen, because you don't know it all. There's so much to learn, and actually, God, half the time I think I know it all, and I really don't. And I think listening and just taking on board people's opinions, and I just think people think they know everything, and you don't. So I'd say just listen and take notes. Is that a really
Yeah.
rubbish answer?
No, it's not. Again,
It's like I read doubting myself.
no, it's not. It's a simple thing of listen to what's being said to you. Do the graph. Listen to what people are telling
Yeah.
you why you're doing it, and
I think it's because people just think they can jump to a position just literally like clicking of a finger. You can't. It doesn't work like that. I think listening is one of the best foundations. Really do.
So, Ian, thank you so much. That was fantastic, and I look forward to seeing you upon your return from Italy. So, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure I'll be very brown.
Another reason not to be now. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
So there we are. See what I mean? A really nice guy and interesting. £250 a week. He was getting paid for one of those early gigs. My goodness me.
I apologise for this comment, Richard, but it's when he said that there's part of me that thinks about when like you and Dad sit there and have conversations about, well, this only used to cost how many shillings and this pounds and stuff like that, and it's like it's only 15, 20 years ago he was getting £250 as a
and you'll hear us go, when I started I was on £18 a week and I thought that was a lot of money.
But it was really interesting with Ian because again he's another person who didn't study costume but just had a passion for accuracy
and fashion and ladies' clothing.
Yes,
and interesting what he was saying about the underpinnings and things. And it occurred to me that again. It's not just Angels; it's any costume house. But where else you can go to the V&A and you can go to exhibitions and you can look at things behind glass cabinets and you can do all of that stuff and you can read books. But where else, other than in a costume house, do you have almost unlimited access to the widest range of period costumes and the underpinnings, and see how these things come together, how it all works, what putting a different shape corset on does to the actual shape of the person who's wearing it. An amazing training ground, really. And as I say, it's not just us. It's any costume house, really. It's not a dressing up box. It's actually a hands-on training manual for costume.
Yeah, and we do keep saying we want to talk about it in another episode, but we really do about how the research and everything works. But just for some reference, I'm sure you will understand anyway, but designers do come in here not to hire anything at all. They literally come in here just to have a look at things, to get an idea of what's going on.
Yeah. For the record, we don't encourage that particularly. We'd
No,
far rather you came in and spent some money with us.
But as an example of people we've interviewed, if you take Janti as an example, in the build-up to the show that Janti's currently working on, Janti spent at least a week in here before she was even on the show because she wanted to get herself completely absorbed in that world. So that's sometimes what the customers like to do for research. And on top of that, we will speak to some people within this industry, but the fashion industry also use us as reference and hire from us for inspiration for their collections going forward. So what Ian's saying about the training and everything and what you learn, there's not many places you can get that sort of training. And that's not, again, patting us on the back. It's any costume house. You can't get the training away from a costume house that will cover you in 2 years that you'll learn every single period.
No, I mean, you say you go to a museum and you can look at shapes. The costume museum in Bath is phenomenal, but rightly, I suppose, we let people touch our costumes and they don't let people touch their costumes very often because it's a different thing. But it's great. I'm also interested to find out, much to my great surprise, that he and Emma swear at each other. I didn't think.
No, they've got a very nice relationship. it's always intriguing if you walk in on the two of them having a conversation at the wrong time. But it's lovely. And when Emma was away on maternity leave, he wasn't put out, but he was upset not to be working with Emma.
No, it is nice to see that relationship, and again, you hinted at, or you mentioned it in the interview. You know, the symbiosis that there is quite often between one of our costumiers and a designer. You know, the trust and the understanding, and of course, that's been touched on in lots of other interviews, designers and design assistants. But it's good that it works with our people as well.
The other thing which I found lovely to hear from Ian's talk is he said, they don't just support me, I support them.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to hear the designers when they talk that way. And a lot of them do. It's just, as he put it quite eloquently, I think Sutirat also sort of made that comment about with Bond and the fact that it was the first job that she properly got to just design because they were on it for so long and her team had it all covered. So they had her back but again, it's just really nice to hear the designers admit how much they rely on their team and how much they need their team, which Ian happily does, especially with the boys. They really were, but on all his shows. So
yeah.
The other statement he said, which maybe we'll put on the book you want to release at Christmas, Richard, was suits are simple, but they're not. Which I thought was a great explanation of the suit.
Yes, I also think that, you know, to say my favourite production is Boys. It's like, well, okay.
Yes, but they had the problem, unfortunately, when that was being filmed, or they were doing it recently. The Boys on Amazon had just come out, and his program was called The Boys to begin with. So it was so interesting seeing people go, "Oh my God, you're doing costumes for The Boys." You're like, yeah, but it's not the superhero one you're thinking about. And then when you start looking into what that's about, it's a completely different story. But no, suits are so simple, but they're not. It's a comment I like.
Well, I think we'll say, well, you know, if anybody wants to go out there and embroider us a few samplers, you know. Another interesting thing about Ian is when he talks about doing these sort of low budget things in the early days when he was designing, he used to come in and he was quite apologetic. You know, he'd go, well, I haven't got very much money. And we'd basically say, look, Ian, it doesn't matter. You know, it's important that you get your career moves on, and we'll do what we can to sort of assist you. You know, you're kind of one of us. You started with us, and sometimes I think people do think we're only interested in big budget and big numbers and all of those things. And of course that isn't true. You know, no. Ian, I hesitate to use the word nurturing because that's a bit kind of patronizing. You know, Ian has made his own career and he's his own man. But I certainly think it's true to say that we've assisted him and others and encouraged them to sort of, you know, go on to bigger and better things because they've been able to use us and our stock. And it's made a nice sort of, you know, show reel for them almost, if you like. And that's something that I think, you know, people should be aware of. We won't always say no, or won't always say yes, rather, but...
No, completely. And you get it from other interviews we've done as well. Sandy Powell was very honest about that with Velvet Goldmine. Nat Turner admits we did it on Creation Stories, Bart Karras on White Lines. So it is something...
In fact, let's face it, Jeremy, we're just thoroughly decent people.
But no, I think it's a very good point to make, which is there's a lot of things at times. It's like the big bad companies and stuff, and it's not. And we do want to work with everyone we can and be as helpful as we can. But talking of things, I did bring it up in the interview, and I did say I would ask the two other co-hosts. Well, seeing as I only have one, I will ask you, and that is the generation that he came here through. I keep hammering home this point about it's quite incredible how many of them are now designers. Has that happened before?
I was trying to think of examples. My feeling is it must have done. I don't think you know, it may not have happened with quite so many, perhaps almost simultaneously. I probably need notice of that question a little more.
Well, no, because there are people who've come through here, like Jack and Darren as an
Yeah.
example, and other people who've come through and gone on to do things. And I don't
I mean,
think
actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think the answer probably is perhaps no, because prior to that, the BBC existed, and the BBC, if you like, was the place where, I mean, I can
Yeah.
talk about the apprenticeship scheme we did, where people like Perry and others have gone on to sort of work in the costume departments, and obviously a lot of the people that have worked for us throughout all of the years have gone on to work in costume. But I suppose maybe the BBC was the training ground until they stopped with their whole in-house.
And that's the and it's not even a pendulum. It's going to be where the next place will be. So yes, it was the BBC. Then a large swatch obviously came through from us, and there'll be another place. And hey, look, people might be as lucky as designers like Rob Jones and Katrina Lindsay. I think Rob was the same, but Katrina definitely left university straight into designing, and I'm sure Rob said the same thing, and other people have done it too. And so it's like it as I said, it just sticks out to me because there was it's the volume at the same time here. That was all, and that's also, again, I don't think people do take it. It's not to imply that being the designer is the be all and end all in this in this industry, because it's not. And we're very the same pride that you take about the creation of designers who've come through us, you take the same with standbys, with assistant designers, and all of them, supervisors and anything. But it's just, as I said, very noticeable with that crop from around 2000, 2004, that a lot of them are now designing in their own right.
Yeah.
Well, the next conversation that we are going to be releasing is Richard's with James Clutton.
Yes, James Clutton, the man behind Opera Holland Park, and of course this particular year, rather the man who isn't behind Opera Holland Park, because of course the whole season went down the drain. But incredibly important to us as a company. Again, a thoroughly nice guy, and what he's doing, I think, to make opera available to schools, children, young people, making it accessible is really quite inspirational.
No, definitely, and I think the thing to bear in mind is this: he is also the first person in his position that we're sort of interviewing. He would be the equivalent of a producer, I suppose, on a film or TV. Yeah. So it's definitely someone who is not from a costume background, but who, well, you'll hear in the interview next week, but who understands the importance of keeping the costume design team happy and what benefits having good costumes brings to his opera, even if it's at an expense. He realizes the value of it, and it's really interesting to hear his view on everything. So so here is a small excerpt of Richard's conversation with
Director of Opera
at Opera Holland Park, James Clutton.
Yes.
You have an unparalleled collection of costumes in this country, probably the world. So obviously most things are going to be there, but there's something about designing specifics, bespoke costumes, particularly for leading ladies or leading men, that can just add to a feeling of well-being and worth given from the company. Because obviously not obviously, but it is the truth, as you know, there's some big opera houses would make every costume. Now, that's just not anywhere near feasible for a company of our size, and possible argument should that be feasible anywhere, but certainly a company our size. But the sheer amount that you have to hire, but then to add that onto it, so well, we need something very specific here, let's make it, just gives it a very different level of freedom and artistic output, I think, which really helps all the designers and us.